functional transitions for kids, and probably bringing pedagogy into it, and how we transfer. Well, for me, I've got an interesting bit of work at the moment is the understanding of intentional teaching across both sectors.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure how that's going to look just quite yet.
Yeah. For a lot of you, I think as you start writing, and especially as if you are following that structure, the suggested structure, your question will evolve slightly and things will fall into place, because the more reading you do, the more you will have a better understanding of exactly where you're going, because the focus and questions, it will evolve even throughout the entire process. So don't be afraid if you feel like you haven't completely got things sorted. It will become clearer to you as the next few weeks unfold and you get a really good understanding of what exactly you're going to do. So don't be afraid of that conceptualization process. It's normal. It's normal, completely normal, just to reassure you. Okay. So what do we think? Is there a difference between pedagogy and instruction? Any thoughts?
I think that from what I've been reading, this is Meg, by the way, pedagogy says it includes a broader scheme of things. So from values and your philosophy, the context that you're working in, and the different theories that you take on, which your help with my question has sort of given me a bit of a challenge to look on at different theories as well, because I came in very strong with Reggio and Playbase, and your suggestion was because I'm looking at critical reflection, so that's part of it as well. So I've been looking at things from a different angle. So I guess I have...
Sorry. Excellent, Meg. So branching out just a little bit more, looking at that balance of approaches. Is that what you mean, Meg?
Yes, it is.
Yeah, excellent. I think pedagogy, it actually requires some larger ideals or set beliefs to give it some life, to give it form. Instruction doesn't. So instruction can occur with absolutely no set of larger beliefs or with no larger ideal in mind. So it's more of a technical process. So it can actually be applied relatively context-free. Would you agree? Instruction? Yeah. So larger aims and beliefs, they really animate pedagogy and give it purpose. So it gives purpose to the efforts of the teacher. So it is very much focused on those personal beliefs and also values as well of the teacher and of the context involved. So, yep, it requires some larger ideals or set beliefs. It can occur with no set of larger beliefs. So in the early years learning framework, pedagogy is defined as all of the deliberate actions and processes that educators organise and implement to translate principles and approaches to curriculum into practice. So the deliberate actions and processes. So specific pedagogical approaches to teaching, we went through some of these last week, like learning through play, scaffolding, intentional teaching, cultural competence. So all those holistic approaches to teaching and learning, and these holistic approaches, it's the basis of the early years learning framework and also the Queensland kindergarten guidelines. So for your reference, up on the slide here, we've got some specific early childhood pedagogies that you might like to do some further reading on. So I also want you to consider the theoretical approaches and reflect on how you draw on them currently in your practice. So a lot of these pedagogies, you would be using them and referring to them and thinking about them in your practice every day, but you may not actually be referring to Rinaldi, Rockall, Malaguzzi or Wood. So let's first start with a pedagogy of play. So Wood's pedagogy of play, this is in relation to understanding the play of children. So Wood suggests that we need to consider the influence of the social interactions and culture. So I would also extend that to society's stereotypes and norms, so gender stereotypes, language and cultural stereotypes. So we often subconsciously impose and mimic these in our learning environments. So in the resources that we use, in the just the use of dolls, the color of dolls' clothes, in things like, you know, figurines that we use, like farm animals, for example. They usually come in sets. There's a mother, there's a father, and there's a baby, or a cow, a calf, and a baby. So, a cow and a mother, a father, and a baby. You know where I'm coming from. I've been working since 8 a.m., so I'm a bit... So what that's saying is that a child's life experience, we need to think about the resources that we use in children's play and what they actually mean, what they mimic. So is it a child's real life experience? So all children don't have a mum and dad. They may have two mums. They may have two dads. They may just have a mum or dad. So we really need to think about what we're doing in our classrooms and the stereotypes that we're using. We need to be very much aware of these hidden parts of our curriculum and also to be purposeful in ensuring that all students' life stories are represented. So this is very much what Wood was looking at. So, you know, the dramatic play, fantasy, exploratory, manipulative, physical, games with rules. So understanding of children's play in all of those areas. So Nodding's pedagogy of care. So as early childhood teachers, we are constantly creating respectful and intelligent care partnerships throughout the day. So especially, I think, if we think in terms of the birth to environment, these will include daily rituals. So it could be things such as simple things like hand washing, feeding babies and infants, changing their nappies, buttoning up clothes. So as early childhood educators, these mundane tasks, I guess some people would consider, we need to make sure that we turn these into thoughtful and caring educational practices. So every moment that we have a child in our setting is something that we can use to be a learning experience or a caring experience. So a pedagogy of care. So Carla Rinaldi's pedagogy of listening, this has a focus on hearing children. So actively listening to and also observing their messages. So valuing their interpretation of the world and giving these young children a voice. So it's actually around engaging with children using all of our senses. We need to suspend all of our judgments. Rinaldi encourages us to listen to children, she says, with an open heart and mind. So having that really deep connection with children, stopping and listening and hearing what they have to say, responding thoughtfully, using those open-ended questions and intentional teaching practices that we talked about last week, so to give children a voice. So as I'm going through these, I'm sure you're thinking these are things that I use daily in my practice. But as I said, sometimes it's subconsciously. We're using these practices, but it's not something that we actually think about. And I want to question as well, are they things that you talk about with your colleagues? Are they things that you would critically reflect on how you actually use these processes and approaches in your practice on a daily basis? So for me, the pedagogy of relationships, it transcends all other pedagogies. So in the late 1960s and early 1970s, there was extensive discussion in Italy where Malaguzzi and his colleagues, they shared their views. A lot of research was done about the importance of prioritizing the development of high quality and enduring relationships with children in these settings. So I think the focus is enduring relationships. So I guess the metaphor of education as relationship, it sees the child as powerful. So rich in resources, highly competent and social. So we need to think about our expectations for these children. So Malaguzzi recognises that from the beginning of life, a child seeks knowledge, so knowledge of the self and knowledge of others as well, and also of the world as well. So children do that through interaction. So interaction with all of those important people in their lives. So really, knowledge is co-constructed. So as educators, as carers, we play a vital role with these young children. So therefore, we must focus not on the child in isolation from others, but instead as being interconnected with others. So in home, in early childhood, in the school, in the neighbourhood, in the state, in the nation. And so I guess this is where Bronfenbrenner's ecological systems theory comes into it as well, if we're looking at theoretical perspectives. So it needs to be extended out to include eventually whole world interactions and understandings as well. Now, pedagogical leaders, and this is something that you will all be very, very familiar with. The Early Years Learning Framework encourages everyone who works with young children to see themselves as pedagogical leaders. And this has become more and more of an emphasis with all of the policies and all of the changes that have happened over the last few years that as early childhood educators, we work together. So the Early Years Learning Framework, it encourages educators to engage in critical thinking, so collaboratively, reflection, and also inquiry. So extending their interests, extending their understandings, and, you know, creating that community of practice. So they also encourage to plan individual professional development to facilitate this best practice and to consider and shape pedagogy within individual settings together. And it's not just colleagues either, that extends to parents as well in our settings. How do your current workplaces or settings encourage this critical collaboration? On a daily basis, how do you meet and discuss your teaching and learning?
I can share, Angela.
Thank you.
Sorry, and I've just joined, so hopefully I'm on the right context. So we have in place at my school what we call HIP sessions. So it's hubs integrating on pedagogy and practice. and every year level comes offline for 90 minutes a week. And that time is dedicated to building the teacher's capability around pedagogy and practice. So I actually met with our prep team today, and we went through an alignment process for our assessment task that's coming up, and looked at some pedagogy and ways that we can approach the unit of work. So I know that's a time that the team work together to, you know, critically collaborate together and reflect on work that has worked, hasn't worked. We run an inquiry cycle into how we're teaching phonics and high frequency words in prep. So that's where a lot of that work happens.
Excellent. Do you actually, you know, you would obviously be evaluating your processes together, giving each other feedback, possibly some peer observation, even in your setting. How do you organise what professional development you go to?
So we have in place something that we call our scale of proficiency. It's specifically in reading because that's our improvement agenda, and the teachers meet. So I'm the literacy coach in early years, and so the teachers meet with me at the start of the year and they complete the scale of proficiency. It's like there's 33 different points, and it's on it's on like a 25-point scale.
Oh, no, you mean
kind of self-reflect at where they think they are in different aspects of the scale of proficiency. So it might be teaching the reading demands of the Australian curriculum. I'm at, I think, a 10 out of 25. So then they can work with me to receive coaching. We have in place you know, like watching others work. We target specific professional development that relates to the goal that they set with me. So
Excellent.
we will then develop whatever area of teaching reading that is in our scale of proficiency. They meet with me 6 months later for a check-in and do another reflective look at the scale of proficiency, and then at the end of the year, and then I share that data with the year level altogether. Like we de-identify it to say, hey, you guys, you know, have done this now for 12 months. Here are our strengths in prep, and here are some things that we've identified we want to work on next year.
Wow, Catherine,
yeah,
that's amazing. Right? Yeah. No, that is really amazing, because that is critical reflection. Now you're really thinking about your practices, and you know that's encouraging lifelong learning, isn't it?
Awesome.
It really, yeah. Oh, that's fantastic. Is there anyone else that has similar something? Thank you very much for sharing that, Catherine. That was brilliant. Anyone else that has a similar, Rochelle?
We have teaching triads, so it's taken from the medical profession, where we professionally work together in a trio. So the teachers are across curriculum and across year levels that come together. Basically, it focuses on, we use swivels, which is video, collecting videos off a swivel of our lessons, and so we choose what lesson that we're going to meet together. We meet together also 90 minutes in a week. And so it's a part of getting teachers to have a look also at your lesson and worked out what you thought worked, what didn't. It's also critiqued up against our pedagogical framework, which is the high impact teaching strategies. We've all individually done an EAN601 survey, where we've actually then got our results with that. Then we use a triangulation of the EAN601 results plus the teachers who have also viewed our videos together to determine what area that you're going to focus on. And then that becomes your action research, so to speak, where an area that you're going to start researching, how can you get better results with that. We also have digital portfolios, so we use the OneNote, so we professional readings are pushed out to everyone's folder, but within the triads, we share within the triads different readings that we'd find helpful for one another. But the focus is really about areas that we're looking for improvement, but we're also looking at the data to be collected to see if there is improvement in the areas that we've been targeting in. So that's based on that. We also had a director of physician learning at the Prince Charles, and she came and shared as well how she did that in a hospital setting. And so the triad model has come from a medical profession at the University of Melbourne. We've been doing that for 12 months now, and we've found that very beneficial, and it sort of happened really naturally as well. So it's not one of those ones where leaders are coming into your room. We're all leaders. So as pedagogical leaders, we take control of our own improvement, and that's our focus. We're wanting to improve for the benefit of ourselves, for our colleagues, and of course, most importantly, the students.
That's fantastic. Yeah, amazing. And the use of the swivels for peer observation has become extremely beneficial in our learning environments. Does anyone, thanks very much for sharing that. Does anyone else use swivels in their learning environments for peer observation? No. Okay. Now, what about in some of our, I want to hear about in, have we got any kindergarten teachers online tonight?
It's Rowan here.
Hi, Rowan.
With state delivered kindies, we work in a lot of rural remote spaces. So we use a OneNote also, but we have a OneNote set up through the NQS. So we have a national quality standards. We ask classrooms or schools or teachers to self-review themselves against the domains. And then we coach, we might go and visit wherever they are. And we then look at which of the elements or the domains they want to move towards meeting or beyond. And we use the OneNote remotely. So they load up observations, they take photos, and then we reflect online on what their next steps for planning might be for those students.
Excellent. So you're reflecting specifically on individual students in that.
Sometimes the environment comes in because we might be focusing on, NQS domain 2. And we might go, okay, so let's look at your environment. So it just depends on the domain, and then what's our focus around. If it's not pedagogy, it'll be around environments or demeanor and so forth.
Excellent. Thanks, Ron. Oh, that's very beneficial. So, 3 different settings, but all very much focused on that critical thinking. And it was interesting too, talking about research. So specifically looking at focuses that are important to you. And I'm sure that would come out in your environment too, Rowan, in terms of researching specific areas if you're differentiating for individual children or students, for example, that you would need to possibly upskill or focus on particular areas that you may not be as confident in. And a lot of the time, that's what being pedagogical leaders and collaborating is all about. So sharing your expertise as well, that is vital. Thank you so much for those of you that shared. That's some really good information there. So I just want to recap on last week. So in terms of beliefs about teaching, so, the framework, the early years learning framework,